I tell you a secret about me?
Wow. Ouch.
The owner of the leasehold was in prison and his assets seized by
What?
debt recovery. A pound put in a property is probably worth more than a pound left in the bank. You're challenged in a way where you have to think like how the person in front of you is thinking, anticipate their arguments and beat them to it.
100% agree with that.
If you're watching this, I loved you, so come back. Something happened and I lost my British accent.
Oh, wow. You appear to be somewhat of a go-getter.
I was teacher's pet.
That does make sense. I think it's such a great space for somebody that is forward-thinking to start up a firm that really, really serves a need for just better practices.
On that note, so for this deal, I got Deal of the Year.
Yeah. What's the best bit of advice you've ever had? And what's the worst piece of advice you've ever had? Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
So at this point, I know that there must be some skeleton in her closet that she's keeping from me.
The friction and the drama and the suspense.
Don't know if this is the correct approach because nobody's ever done it before. But this is how I do things.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Property People. Today I am joined by Mariam Radi. How are you today, Mariam?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm a huge fan of the podcast and I'm so grateful and kind of having a little bit of a fangirl moment to be sat here. So thank you for having me.
Good. Well, I'm very, very grateful that you decided to join us, especially since recently you've had some successes that we will be talking about. But before I jump into all of that, a couple of things. Firstly, a little intro. You are a paralegal turned property developer, and most recently you've won a flurry of property investor awards, an award ceremony that I'm privileged to actually be a judge on the judging panel. So it's with great delight we get to find out a little bit more about you, about the awards that you've won, about the last 12 months, about what it takes to be an award-winning property developer investor, and the rest of it. So thank you for taking the time. And before we jump into all of those things, I always like to find out a little bit more about you, and in particular, who were you at school? What type of person were you? You appear to be somewhat of a go-getter. Were you like that at school, or were you disinterested?
I was teacher's pet. I was that annoying kid that would stop you in the hallways and try to sell you tickets to Spring Carnival or something. So I was like president and chairman of every other committee. I think I was president of the prom committee, charity, fundraising.
Oh my days.
So I was that person, the one that would go into the lesson, disrupt the lesson, ask you if you joined anything.
Wow. So
I don't know if I was popular, but I knew all the popular kids. And yeah, I guess I was kind of a go-getter from the beginning.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So that is, there's not many people that walk in and say that, I must admit. We get all sorts, and I've had all different, and I'm always interested about, especially school, which are somewhat formative years for adult life. Obviously, there's stuff that happens on before that, but I think that the type of person you are in those years helps you in what you become later on in life. And to be somebody that's like, so where did you grow up? Because you don't have a distinct British accent.
I don't. So I was actually born in Manchester, but I don't sound like it at all.
No, you don't sound like somebody from Oasis or anything, no.
But I moved to Kuwait when I was 10 years old, and I grew up there. So I stayed in Kuwait until I was about 20, and then I moved back to Manchester to study. That's where I did my law degree. But somehow, while I was in Kuwait, something happened, and I lost my British accent. And then it ended up sounding like this.
You got like international school?
Yeah, so it's, if you learn English in a country where it's a second language, if you've realized, everybody kind of sounds a little bit American.
Yeah. No, I lived in Hong Kong. I've got friends in Dubai. I've got basically friends that have grown up in all parts of the world, and typically, if they've gone to an international school, they come out with an American accent for the most part. There's always exceptions to every rule, but that does make sense. And do you think that helped you form the worldview that you have today? Because you seem very much a people person. You seem like somebody that likes to go out there and socialize and slightly extroverted and comfortable in and around other people. Do you think that that's helped?
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of school that I went to was an international school. So we had people from all over the world whose parents had commuted to Kuwait to work. And it definitely broadens your horizon. So I met people from all sorts of nationalities, backgrounds, religions. And I think when I came into the UK, I think it's when you have that kind of foundation growing up, you become more of a people person, I think.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Helped.
And then from going to school or university rather in Manchester, why Manchester and what did you study?
I studied law.
Of course.
And Manchester, my dad had gone to Manchester University. We were very familiar with the city,
Right.
and I kind of always had it had always had a special place in my heart. So we'd always summer in Manchester or winter there. And I think that jump from leaving a country like Kuwait and going to a new one, I kind of wanted that sense of familiarity that I knew I'd have in Manchester because it was a big shift, moving country. So knowing that I was going to somewhere that wasn't completely brand new just kind of made the transition a little bit easier. But I've always loved Manchester, and I'm so glad I picked it. But I decided to move to London because Manchester's great when you're a student and you're young, but if you want to make it as an entrepreneur, I always feel like London's the place to be. Although there are many successful entrepreneurs in Manchester and it's a great place to grow, but the kind of opportunities and the speed at which things move in London, it kind of forces you to constantly up the bar, and you're always in rooms where there's people that are doing better than you, and it's motivating. So I knew that if I wanted to see that kind of growth professionally and personally, I should probably relocate to London.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I grew up in the northeast in around Durham. Newcastle was the major city that I used to frequent. You know, choices of other ones like Sunderland, etc. But certainly, and they're successful people, and some of them inspired me to do what I do today. But I think when you come to capital cities or major hubs of the world, whether it could tourism, commerce, finance, general opportunity, London is up there with only a handful of cities like maybe New
Yeah.
York and Hong Kong and maybe even things like Dubai. So
Yeah, I
totally
feel
makes
the
sense that
novelty
you.
of London because I lived abroad. So saying, and a lot of the people that went to my school were international students, so it's difficult for them to get a visa to London. I mean, my best friend lives in Milan and he's Lebanese originally, and he cannot get a visa to London. So I think we take for granted the
Yeah.
fact that we have access to this city and its resources. So yeah.
It's such a great city. Honestly, I absolutely love London. I think it literally is one of the best places in the world, especially when the sun shines, which isn't as often as I'd like it to. But when it does, I don't think there's many better places in the world to be. And so you went so from Manchester, and your father studied. Did your father also study law at Manchester?
Nope. He actually did physics, and then he changed to telecommunication. So my dad got into it when it was up and coming and brand
Right,
new.
right.
And yeah, he's just done telecommunication ever since. But he's got the brains that he gave to my brother because my dad went to Oxford. My brother's doing medicine. So they're the kind of students that will be in the library with a book getting top marks.
The smart brainiacs, yeah. And then, but why did you study law? I mean, the guy that inspired me to get into property, my best friend's dad, he said that lawyers were the smartest people on the planet. So
I
why,
think
yeah, why did
everybody
you
should get a law degree. To
really
be honest,
tell
yeah.
me? Because I also read that you absolutely love property and law and
Yeah.
business and law. And
Yeah.
what is it about law that kind of inspires you or triggers your stimulation?
When I was at law school, almost every single week, you're challenged in a way where you have to think like how the person in front of you is thinking. You have to anticipate their arguments and beat them to it in a sense. You'll be reading text that you'll have to read between the lines and find the loopholes in. If you're drafting a text, you have to draft something that doesn't have any loopholes. Or if it does, then you know how to back it up. And so it rewires your brain to see things in a different way. Also, we're always signing contracts. And having a legal background means that you understand them when you're reading them. And it's always better to understand what your rights are, especially when you're in the business of property, which is a highly regulated industry. For you to understand what your rights are or what your responsibilities are, it puts you in a much better position. I think that everybody should study law, to be honest. And I'm grateful that I did it because I attribute my success in real estate to my law degree, actually.
You say that again?
I attribute my success in property to my law degree.
You attribute sex. Okay, so the law,
Yeah,
the
for
fact that
me.
you were good at law helps you through the being a better property investor.
I think so, yeah.
Got it.
For
Okay.
me.
Well, we will definitely unpack that as we evolve in this discussion. But just on the law thing, there's a lot of reading and writing, and you alluded to that a second ago. That reading of reams and reams of documents, and then also dissecting every single word, and was that word put there on purpose, or reading between the lines, is there a loophole within using that word, and how can it be interpreted, and all of that. Are you generally a good reader? Do you generally kind of at home reading other textbooks and stuff, whether it be for sciences and astrology, or maths and physics, or kind of a non-fiction?
I loved reading growing up.
You love it, yeah.
I think I read all the Harry Potter books by the age of maybe 11, the ones that had come out. And then by the time I was doing my GCSEs, I was, for fun, reading like Shakespeare and old American literature.
Wow.
And if you'll see my old Shakespeare books, I've like dissected each sentence. I found it so much fun because I'm very imaginative, and took me to another world. I think some people play video games. I'd be sat with a book. That was my thing. And in COVID, I actually wrote a book because I'd read so many great books. And then I started to read the ones that were on the New York Times bestseller. And I quite arrogantly thought to myself, well, if they can do it, then I can do it. And then I wrote a book during COVID that's actually getting published now. But I'm a bit scared to publish it because nobody's read it except me. So I don't actually know if it's good or not.
Oh, wow. And so you are very much a bookworm. And that's, my old man, actually, he reads a lot of books. And one of my very, very good friends as well. And I just find that sometimes the conversation with these people is slightly different because they've got so much knowledge to call back on. But for some people, I mean, dyslexics, for example, the ADHD, the big thing these days, they find it really hard to focus on reading text. I read, but I do find it challenging. Unless I'm really enthralled by what I'm trying to read and what I'm trying to extract from it, I find it difficult. Do you do audiobooks and stuff as well, or is it just purely, head in a book?
Kind of old-fashioned.
This episode of Property People was brought to you by Merryoaks Property Finance. Merryoaks Property Finance is my company. I'm the managing director and founder. We launched August of last year. We provide finance for SME property investors and developers across the UK. Everything from bridging to development finance to whatever your exit might look like. If you're going to hang on to the properties, from commercial term loans, buy-to-let, holiday-let, service accommodation, etc. We are investors, developers, landlords in the background. We have been lenders. We have been estate agents. So we very much know the value chain. We very much know what you go through, the highs and the lows, and we want to share them with you. So if you are looking to make an investment, if you are looking to refinance something, if you are looking for funding for any of your property investments, please do reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
So I will have the hardback, not even the iPad or Kindle, because I always like to read with a pen in my hand. But can I tell you a secret about me that not a lot of people know?
No one's going to listen to this anyway, so tell me the secret.
I'm actually dyslexic.
Oh, is it? Oh, wow.
Yeah, but my dyslexia is more to do with numbers than it is. But I kept it a secret for a really long time because dyslexia is often, I think, synonymous with people that might not understand or like stupidity or something. Because I've even heard it said with people that don't know that I'm dyslexic will use it derogatorily. That's the word, derogatory. So I've always kept it to myself, but it doesn't mean that you do things wrong. It just means that you might do them in a different way. Right. And I'm really good at law and reading and writing, dissecting words because I'm dyslexic, because I'm not as strong when it comes to the numbers.
Okay.
So it might have been my secret little superpower that for years I kept a secret, because I thought, to the point where I didn't even want, when I'd apply for jobs and they'd say, do you have special, conditions or whatever, I wouldn't tell them. And I would do exams in the times that, because I was so scared that if they found out, they would just secretly
They would look at you differently, they'd judge you differently.
And they would underestimate me even more.
No, that is a fair thing. And with the ADHD thing as well, I think it's over the last 12 months, the amount of people that are telling me that they are either ADHD or been diagnosed, or, or they've been suffering from this thing that they didn't know what it was until more recently. But I've always tried to maintain the opinion as much as I can is that actually if you do it differently, it becomes a superpower. It just depends on, and of course there's different people at different ends of the spectrum on
Yeah.
these sorts of things. But certainly it seems to have become a superpower for you because you said you've attributed all of the goodness that you're doing, the successes that you've had through being able to do this law degree, and you are a paralegal. Is that correct?
I was, but now I'm doing property.
Okay, so just for the transition from being a paralegal to property, what is a paralegal for people who don't know?
Paralegal is like a baby lawyer. So essentially, you're kind of doing everything a lawyer does, but you're not qualified. And so you're still, for the you're supposed to be just assisting on cases, but if you're good enough at what you do, you end up just carrying the case and doing all the work. But you can't sign off on anything.
Right.
So you can't really have a file under your name
Right.
because you're only technically supposed to be supporting. But you'll find a lot of paralegals that are just doing the job of a lawyer, which is why the qualifying route has changed. And if you're a paralegal for, I think it's 2 years, you've passed 3 exams, then you'll be a qualified lawyer. Before it wasn't like that. You had to get a training contract.
Okay. So have you ever thought about doing that and going?
I have, to be honest. I kind of toy around with the idea of potentially qualifying just because law is a huge passion of mine. But yeah, if it's in the pipeline and I can do it, then I will do it.
Yeah, because you've got you talked about entrepreneurialism and being in London, the inspiration here, and I mean one of the things that I've struggled with over the last 12 months is lawyers and the legal process. It's been painful, and I can't throw all of them under the bus. That would be so unfair. Because there have been some that have just broken the mold and been absolutely phenomenal, exceptional, and how you'd imagine that this whole thing should work. But for the most part, actually, just before this, I was literally speaking to a client whereby his solicitor was insisting that he is not allowed to exchange until he's got building insurance in place, even though that's not a legal requirement nor a funding requirement. Plus a bunch of other stuff that he was doing, and he just keep like I was CCing him in with some other stakeholders to show that I'm trying to be transparent. This is where we're at, and he keeps on saying that I'm gonna cease working for you. I'm gonna see like just totally being obstructive as much as possible. So my point being is, if you were thinking of going into the legal system and providing that service, I think it's such a great space for somebody that is forward-thinking, progressive, young, fresh, that wants to shake things up a little bit, to start up a firm that really, really serves a need for just better practices.
On that note, when I'm doing interviews, I actually find that is discouraged. They don't always want somebody that can think outside the box or shake the system. The legal system is so archaic that most of the time they're looking for somebody that just knows how to tick a box, just knows how to push the paper, do what they're told. So if you come with this, I think outside the box, I'm creative mindset, then it usually works against you. That's what I've realized. Until you make it to potentially partner level where nobody's going to ask you questions. When you're a paralegal, they're not hiring you for your creativity.
Right.
So yeah, if I qualify, then yeah, the world is my oyster. But that's one thing that I kind of struggled with a little bit, is kind of proving to potential law firms that I will leave the creativity behind, because it's so apparent that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm ambitious. So I think that kind of, they're worried I'm going to rock the boat, which I'm not gonna, but yeah.
Sometimes, it is a fact of life that sometimes the entrepreneurial spirit within any person makes them unemployable because they just can't take the direction from somebody that they disagree with, and it just doesn't work, and you end up clashing, and that's why you end up setting up your own business or going into something else like property development, which is, I assume, kind of how this has all evolved. Because tell us more about how the whole property thing started for you, because whilst you're acting as a paralegal, and what sorts of cases were you working on?
So when I first graduated, I did litigation, but because of how much I loved law, actually when I was a paralegal, I was very much absorbing from my supervisors and like just ready to do what they needed me to do. So the side of me that exists in property development doesn't actually exist in the realm of law, because I'm sat there just absorbing and trying to understand as much as I can. But I did litigation at the start, which was
Yeah.
really fun. So I've advocated in court, so stood before a judge and all of it. And I then did financial services, so investment banking, corporate commercial, and that was more contracts based. But I had more fun with litigation, to be honest.
Is it the friction and the drama and the suspense of like, oh my God, you know, this could
Because
go
every
either
day
way?
was just a different day, and because of how many of my friends in the industry I find are kind of on the verge of like maybe a litigation case or something. Like if they have a dispute with their lawyer, with their builders, or they might have a tenant dispute, it's you're kind of looking at early stages of a litigation, whereas corporate commercial would be more so closer to what you might do, which is the lending and the finance and the
Yeah.
fine tuning these agreements. So it felt like the litigation part, even looking back at it, was more in breadth with what I face on an every day-to-day basis now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I look back at it fondly, I think.
The litigation does seem always a little bit more fiery and something you could probably make a Netflix documentary out. Whereas property finance or conveyancing is a bit more boring, for want of a better word. But certainly, okay. So in terms of then property investment, so tell us how that came into your life. Why property? Why not cryptos and stocks and shares and the rest of it?
I think I understood that a pound put in a property is probably worth more than a pound left in the bank. I thought if I leave my money in the bank for 2 years while I try to understand crypto, then it might depreciate in value. If I put this in a buy to let, then I'm generating an income. Even if the property value doesn't increase and it just plateaus and I sell it and I just break even on how much I paid for it, I would have generated some income in the meantime. So there's still some profit. So I went into it with a very, I want a very low risk investment opportunity, and that's why I'm going to do property. But once I went into it and I started to understand it more, I realized that property is something that if you understand it and you do well in it, you can do really well in it.
Yeah.
Because I compare it to, for example, medicine. My brother is going to be a doctor. You don't, if you're a really, really good doctor, you're a really good doctor. But even if you're an okay-ish doctor, you're still a doctor, so you're still getting a really good salary. But in property, being an okay-ish property developer doesn't cut it. You need to be really good at what you do for it to be worth the time and the effort. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try to be really, really good at this, because this is what you can do when you, I wouldn't say not understand, but when you just put your money in a property and step back, you can break even. That's amazing. Because if you put money in crypto and you don't understand it, you're not going to break even.
You might
You're gonna
lose
lose
half your back.
everything.
Yeah, exactly. And then you talk about your brother there and inspirations around you. So for me, my parents were an inspiration in terms of me getting into the property industry. They were doing little flips in the northeast of England, in the coal mining pit villages in the 80s, and beyond that. And my best friend's dad was a big property guy in the northeast. He had estate agents and then property developments as well. So in terms of your inspiration to get into the property, who would you say that those people are?
I want to say people that I see doing well in the industry, and that sometimes changes. I don't think I have just one person that I look up to. I think there are so many people in our industry that are doing so well that created something from nothing, and I want to say I look up to them all collectively. And they all have common characteristics. They're all hardworking, and they all have a fantastic work ethic. They're all fair. They all kind of play by the book, and that's something that I believe in. I think if you do everything right, then you'll have a long career and there's longevity in what you do. If you try to cut corners or do illegal stuff, then you're probably not going to be as successful for as long as you would like to. So that's another thing that a lot of these people have in common. And I'm so grateful to be able to have access to the people that I look up to and for them to be sometimes in the same room as me. And yeah.
And so, with the property strategies that you deploy, so property development is such we're just speaking with somebody else who's got 25 years of experience, and he's been doing everything from, land with planning to unconsented sites, doing title splits, and there's so many different ways of cutting the cake, right, and adding the value.
Yeah.
What is the strategy that you've been focused on? Because obviously you've been winning some awards recently. So over the last 12, 24 months, where has your focus been? And has it been a bit of a scattergun approach and you've kind of fallen upon something coincidentally? Or have you been quite strategic and focused on one particular thing?
My award-winning deal is kind of a one and only one, and I'll tell you about that. I don't know if I'm going to ever be able to do anything like it again, which I think is why it impressed so many of the judges, because it's something they haven't seen ever before, and I don't know if I'm ever going to see again. But aside from that, I focus more on, I want to say, HMOs, but even with that being said, my next two projects are my old house in Manchester, which is turning into a HMO, and my new house in London, which we're just doing a wraparound extension potentially. We're still in planning stages. And I'm really excited about that because they're two completely different projects. So we'll be adding value to my house in Manchester because we're getting a commercial evaluation on it. But my house in London, we're adding value because we're doing a very unique renovation on a road where there's no cap on how much a house is worth. So, for example, when you're looking at Liverpool or even Manchester, and you look at the road, you know that nobody realistically is going to pay more than, say, £500 a room or £200 for a house, or the HMO is only going to ever be worth this much, and so you have to hone in on your budget. But my new house in London, and this is generally the case in London, you don't really have that cap. I mean, people are more willing to pay more. So on my road, you have a house that's sold for 600 and a house that's sold for 2.5, and you know that if you allocate your money correctly in the property, then you could potentially reach the 2.7 mark if you wanted to. So it's giving me much more flexibility and freedom. And in that sense, I want to say, the strategy sometimes change depending on the property. But my deal, the one that I won the award for, you already know about it, don't
yes,
you?
I do. I remember judging it. But you tell us about it.
Okay. It's a pretty long story, so I'll narrow it down.
No, give us the long version. We've got plenty of time. Yeah.
Okay. There was two properties, and there was a HMO for sale, and I went to view it, and I was the youngest person in that room viewing it because they did an open house viewing. And I remember I was about to go to Winter Wonderland, so I looked ridiculous.
So this property is in London?
Yeah, I had a big fur coat, and these people were in suits. And I looked around, and I put an offer, and it got rejected.
And this was on the market on Rightmove?
It was on Vesta.
Vesta?
Vesta used to be similar to Rightmove, but it was for developers and investors only. So the only properties on it were HMOs or blocks of apartments or properties needing doing up. And I loved it. They've actually they've disappeared. I don't know where. I hope they come back. But
oh, it's disappeared. How long ago was this?
This was about 2 years ago.
Yeah, and Vesta doesn't exist anymore?
No.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I know, because if you're watching this, Vesta, I loved you, so come back. But so I went and I viewed it, and she declined my offer, and I can understand. I was about to go to Winter Wonderland, and I was like 23 at the time, and I just looked like somebody who wouldn't be able to manage any property. So she declined my offer, but I kept my eye on it because it was listed below market price and because I could see that there was a potential to add value. And I saw it on the market again. I put another offer, declined, and then on the market again. We're talking about 6 months. And then eventually I put an offer of 80,000 below market price, and she accepted. That was very ambitious.
Wow,
I remember everybody telling
good.
me 80, she's never going to accept.
Did you feel uncomfortable putting that offer in it?
I thought, what's the worst that could happen? She comes back and says, no, she'll tell me the number that she wants. Looking back, I should have given her like 100K below. I don't know if she was going to accept on the first go.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
But 2 months down the line, and we began the conveyancing process, and my solicitor's like, we're sending letters, but we're not getting a response. And I'm trying to get the funding sorted, and I was 23, and it was almost impossible. No bank was going to look at me. My collateral was decent, but I was looking to borrow a huge amount. And it turns out she hadn't hired a solicitor because she didn't think that the sale would go ahead. She thought it'd fall through again. So at this point, I know that there must be some skeleton in her closet that she's keeping from me. It didn't deter me away because I thought if it's a problem, then I could maybe get it for cheaper and resolve the issue. So I was still really motivated to get my hands on it. It was like this 15-bed HMO with 2 flats.
Wow.
So it was this big old thing.
So it's 15 beds over two apartments.
Over 3 buildings.
Over 3 buildings.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, 3 buildings.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it was big, and I knew
and how many
if I got
kitchens
this-
were there in the? Like, was it
4 kitchens.
4 kitchens. Okay, nice.
I don't even know how many bathrooms,
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
honest
yeah.
with you.
And it was run down.
It
like
wasn't. It
used?
was mid-range.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
say
Tired.
a little bit.
Little
Yeah,
bit
could
used,
use.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
could use with a revamp. But I knew if I got my hands on this, and then even if all I did was sit on it for 2 years, resolve the issue, or maybe increase the rents, that I could sell it and make a profit. Or if I split the title deed, split the 3 properties. So I knew that there was a lot of ways around this.
And so, what was the asking price?
It was 1.47.
1.47, and you offered 80. What?
80 below.
80 below.
Yeah.
Okay, and then she said,
She said, I'll accept it if you buy it.
yeah.
But nobody else is. So it turns out the problem was that she was illegally, so remember we said there was 2 buildings?
Yeah.
She was illegally renting out the basement to the property next door,
Right.
which she owned the freehold to, but she wasn't selling the freehold to that building. So she was just selling the HMO. But if you buy this, you are potentially inheriting a lawsuit. So
Right.
you could lose a room, you could be sued for all of the rental income from the room that you've received.
So she's renting out something that she doesn't own.
Yeah.
Effectively.
And her argument was adverse possession. Are we familiar with this?
Tell us about that.
Well, adverse possession means that if you occupy a property or an area of land for over 10 years,
Yeah.
it becomes yours.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Of
like
course,
squatters'
there's,
rights, basically.
Yeah, very strict terms and conditions,
yeah,
like
yeah.
defined border. The owner has to, they can't accept that you are there, but you have to do it so openly and obviously that if they were paying attention to their property, they would have known you were there.
Yeah, yeah.
So she's claiming adverse possession, but it's a very difficult case to win. And we hear about it, but very rarely would you see it be approved in court. And also the terms and conditions are so wishy-washy. All the owner has to do is turn around and say, I knew you were there and I let you stay there, and then it's thrown your whole case out. Because how do you prove that? Or how do you prove a negative? How do you prove that somebody didn't know something or didn't approve something?
It's a 50-50 case at best, probably.
Yeah, maybe even lower. But that was her case, and I can see why a lot of people didn't want to buy it. Also, it would make the borrowing so difficult because it was already pretty hard enough for me to try to get a mortgage on this thing. Now it's it's a legal dispute.
No, I mean, bridges, you can get a bridging loan for almost anything, but when there's a title dispute, then it's like, well,
then
what am I actually getting here as
I
security?
know, because it could kill the value. You don't know how much it's going to be worth. But technically, that was not part of the HMO. Technically, I wasn't borrowing for that property. I was borrowing for the HMO. And this dispute with the freehold was separate.
Okay, you managed to compartmentalize it.
Yeah, so I was like, because the room isn't in the HMO, it's separate to the HMO, I'm not really borrowing for it. Worst case
And the
scenario.
access for the room was not through the HMO?
You could access it separately from next door, but she's
Okay.
already created an access for it from the HMO. But you could, in theory, split the title, and then that just be its own issue, with its own everything. That's how I got the funding, to be honest. It's a little loophole.
Okay.
But the reason why I went for it. Wait, you're in finance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, off the record, is what I did illegal? Don't disclose it if it is.
So no, I don't know. I need to understand it better and look all the plans to give you proper
my
advice
God.
as to what
Because
my
I still
opinion
got
would
this
be.
property. Okay, the problem's solved, but like I don't want to.
But also, I'm in finance. I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if something is definitely illegal or not. But what I could say is,
I think it's fine. 'Cause
yeah, I
basically
think
didn't
it should be
disclose to the
fine.
bank that there's a legal dispute over one of the rooms. I just didn't disclose that there is a room.
Well, unless they asked.
I just said there was
And-
14 in this building, and I treated that as completely separate because technically it's in next door, and I'm not borrowing for next door.
Yeah, so you just so
Right?
yeah, if you split, well, I mean, it's again these grey areas.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is a philosophy in business that it's walking the line, right? You know, you should never
Yeah.
cross the line. You should know where the line is.
Yeah.
And you should never cross it. but sometimes walking the line
Doing things
is.
by the book.
Pardon?
Doing things by the book.
Or doing things in the grey area. That's basically walking the line. Is
Right.
you're on the line, but you're not
Yeah.
crossing it. But you're so close to the edge that it could be argued either
Either way,
way, and you've got to hope that you're surrounded by people that will give you the benefit of the doubt about whatever you're doing.
You know what? Yeah.
And I've read so many different business books from so many different like biographies of people that have made billions and taken huge risks, and pretty much all of them have walked the line at some point or other. There is a common thread there. There's exception to every rule, but I would say that that's fairly common in some way, shape, or form. They've pushed the boundary right up to that line. So this could be falling in within that. But ultimately, the most important thing, in my opinion, is the outcome at the end. So what you were able to do is take these two buildings, title split them, effectively get a clean title,
Yeah.
which was satisfactory for lending in the opinion of your lender's eyes.
Yeah.
And you were able to get the bridging loan on it. Was there a term loan?
Mortgage.
A regular term loan mortgage. And then what happened?
So I told her if she throws in the freehold of next door, she wasn't going to sell it. I said, if you throw it in for free, I'll take legal responsibility for what you're doing. What she didn't realize is legal responsibility transfers with ownership anyways. So she could have sold it to me and I would still be responsible. But she gave it to me for free. So in the exchange, she added the freehold of next door. And then this is where my mission started. I thought if I acquire the leasehold, then problem solved.
And exactly.
There's no more issue. And I can, even if I wanted to sell it on, I could. I did my due diligence, and I did this before we exchanged. The owner of the leasehold was in prison, and his assets seized by debt recovery. So they didn't care what you were doing. They just wanted to get their money back. The property had 50 years left on it, and it was a hairdressing salon.
50 years on the lease.
Yeah, so it was a very short lease. Also, you have a title dispute. So who's going to buy it? I mean, it was hard enough trying to sell a HMO that was generating income. No one was going to buy this little hairdressing salon where half of it is disputed. So I drafted 7 letters of claim after reviewing the lease, areas where they hadn't paid ground rents. The property was in a state of disrepair. They tried to sell it without telling me. And do you know why I sent them 7 letters and not just 2 or 3 with 7 bullet points?
I do not, but I'm curious to know why.
Because they have to disclose every single letter when they sell the property or if they want to sell it. So if they have to disclose, if you disclose 1 letter of claim, you think, I could challenge this. You disclose 7.
Yes, I don't want to take on this.
This sounds like a pretty nightmare of a freehold owner. I don't want to get into this. So I disclosed 7 with an offer of 100,000. And they rejected my offer and they put the property on auction. The thing with a letter of claim is because I knew I was dealing with debt recovery, ethically I was okay. Because if it was like, a family or a person, I probably wouldn't have taken this approach. But I knew from the get-go, before we exchanged on the HMO or I acquired the freehold, that this was just a bank.
This is pure business.
It wasn't personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I sound a bit like a villain, right? With telling the story.
Well, you've got to strategize and you've got to have tactics. Depending on who you're doing, you've got to do things with a moral compass, certainly.
Yeah.
But if you're dealing with debt collectors and that sort of thing.
It's not personal.
At the end of the day, it's going to boil down to numbers for the most part.
Yeah.
And a little bit of posturing, which seems like what you were doing. So tell them, continue.
So it went to auction. I called the auction house, and with the letters of claim, 3 or 4 of them was stuff that was genuine, and then the other 4 was like made up because you can sue anybody for anything, and I was trying to make a point. Right. I was
elaboration.
I mean, I had an inkling that perhaps they'd stolen electricity from my property because I sent an electrician. I didn't have it in writing, so that went in a letter of claim. You can put anything you want in one of these. And because of my legal background, I was drafting them myself. So my lawyer wasn't even charging me like £1,000 a pop. I would just draft them. He'd read it, and then he would
sign off.
Send it off, because he could see that it was all within merits. So to auction, it went. I called them. Nobody bid on it, and I bought it for 96,000.
96,000. Wow.
And it's worth 425 just that flat.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, because now it's freehold. And the funny thing is, when I acquired it and I got the keys, it has its own basement. She was never renting out the basement. I don't know why she thought she was.
What?
I know. So I looked at the whole floor plan and I thought, there's 2 basements here. One belongs to the HMO and the other one belongs to the hairdressing salon, and there was no overlap.
So
I don't know why she thought that.
On the lease plan though, normally there's kind of the red line behind. So
Yeah.
was that not clear on the lease plan
Because of the
on land
size
registry?
of this. So the HMO had a basement, and then the leasehold had a basement as well. And she was suggesting that it was the same basement that was appearing on both floor plans, but it wasn't. It was actually different.
Oh my days.
Yeah, so I don't know why she thought that she was renting out there. When I look back, we never actually got a confirmation from anybody but her that the basement was being rented out. Like the other side never claimed anything. So I don't know why she thought that.
So and so this lady, like, do you know much about her? Was she an accidental landlord? Because she doesn't seem too sophisticated.
Yeah, well, she found her husband having an affair with one of the tenants in the HMO.
Ouch.
Yeah, so then she kicked him out of the house or something. So then I think he cleared their accounts, flew to the US and stopped paying the mortgage on the HMO. So then she was stuck with it. She just wanted to get rid of it. And it felt personal for her because obviously her husband had.
So she didn't really know what she was doing. Her husband had bought
I think
this
she
thing.
hated the HMO, to be honest. And she just wanted to get rid of it. And nobody would buy it. So when she found somebody that was willing to take it off her hands, it was already listed below market price. And then she accepted an even lower offer. I don't think she cared, to be honest.
So now you own a HMO on one side, which is kind of operational, which you bought for 1.47. And then you've got this other apartment, which you bought for 96,000, which is worth 400,000.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good deal. And it's all a paper exercise.
Yeah. And it's increased the value of my own HMO because that was being dragged down because of next door. I've integrated the flat into the HMO, so it's all one title deed. If I want to sell it, it'll be 4 flats, 15-bed HMO, and it's just, I've opted against splitting the title. Also, it's all, because if I do, the next person is going to run into the same issues that the woman that sold it to me did, because the building is so connected. It's going to cause problems for people down the line. So let's just keep it as one.
I mean, look, that is a very, very clever way of doing it, and you've tidied it all up since, so that it has its attraction for any future buyers. It's nice and clean, crisp.
Yeah. While my team was renovating the flat, they were also fixing up the HMO. That's how I got to save on building costs, because the more work you give them, the more of a discount they give you.
Yeah, sure.
But that's what I meant when I said I don't think that I'd be as successful in property if it wasn't for my legal degree. Because if you show me a hole in a roof, I'll have a modest understanding of what that would take to fix. But give me a illegal occupation of a basement, and that I understand. That I know what to do with. So it was just, I think, understanding what your strengths are, and then finding deals where you can utilize your own strengths.
100% agree with that. There's again the conversation I was having earlier with another developer. They were a building surveyor, and I know other people that are contractors. It makes sense if you're a contractor, find stuff with planning and just build it out. If you're an architect or a planning consultant, go and find unconsented site, secure the planning, and then move on to the next one, flip it. Whereas legal arbitrage, which is basically where you're at. And I know a few other people that do that sort of thing, that really understand defective leases and talking about title splitting and low leases and all that sort of thing. And that's what you've been able to do for yourself.
Yeah.
Now, name the awards that you won.
Okay. So for this deal, I got Deal of the Year.
Yeah.
Youngest Investor of the Year. I'm the only person to win both. And Short Lease Deal of the Year.
So tell us a little bit about your background as well, how you're working with, because you're buying a £1.47 million asset. You're winning the Young Investor of the Year. Are you working with investors? Is it something to do with your family background? Because there'll be a lot of people watching this thinking, wow, Jesus Christ, I want to do a £1.47 million. Can I get into it? Or how does that work?
I think for fairness, I strategically only told PIA about the 96,000 to 400 because I wanted to be fair. I didn't get that because of any kind of advantage that I had. So the freehold I got for free, and that was literally how much it cost me. The rest of it was I sold land that I had overseas, and I borrowed a large amount, by the way. I know it's 1.47, but I borrowed over $1 million. So my mortgage is heavy. I've offset it a lot since incorporating the income from the flat and being able to remortgage with a better rate because I've got more experience and it's a lot easier for me. But I wasn't making a lot of money from this. I think I wasn't making any. I think there were some months where we were just about breaking even with the mortgage cost and the maintenance. But I kind of saw the long game. Um, so yeah, I just used my collateral and I sold some stuff overseas, and I kind of took a huge gamble where I was like, I'm not going to make any money from this for like 2 years. But when I do make money, oof, I'm going to win awards for it.
Very good. So yeah, you were able to liquidate some other assets to bring it over to the UK, and that was your support system. And when you're investing, so you're doing this stuff in London. Are you based in Manchester or London anymore? Have you got anything
Just
going on in
London.
Manchester?
So in Manchester, it's just my old house, and we're just waiting on planning for that. So we're going to convert that into a HMO.
And how do you find the traveling between the two cities? Because if you're going to be doing a development up there, eventually once you got the planning through, do you feel comfortable with that, or do you think that that's going to... because there's two different schools of thought. Again, one is, should I invest locally and really get to know my own backyard?
Yeah.
Or do I chase yields and return, which could be anywhere in the country?
The only reason why I'm comfortable doing a development in Manchester is because I have been fortunate enough to create a very strong relationship with my contractors.
How have you managed to do that? So, because
Because I'm young.
yeah.
Because
Some people might
they
say they're
know
young, you're naive, and then
How did you create a meaningful relationship with contractors? They're so hard to create relationships with. It's because the contractor knew my dad already. So I already know his family and he knows my family. And because we've done a few deals so far, and I'm pretty easy to work with. So I think he enjoys the business that comes from me, and he can see that the better I get at this and the more work that I give him, if I do better, then naturally he will as well. And I think that we're both excited about what the future might look like. So he doesn't work on HMOs often, which is why I'm going to send him up to Manchester to learn with my house, and I'm going to hire a project manager so he's getting the guidance that he needs, because once he understands HMOs and he does them really well, he'll be able to just do them with minimal supervision, to be honest. And I already know that I don't need to micromanage him, and we've built that kind of trust. But it's very much like a business partnership, me and him. And yeah.
And you mentioned your dad there, and you mentioned some land that you sell. Would you say that your family has been supportive in everything that you've done so far? Have they been inspirational to you?
Yeah, my dad definitely. He's a great businessman, and he did an MBA at Oxford. It's something that I want to do. And growing up, we'd sit on Sundays and he'd just talk to us about business and finance. So indirectly, yes, I think he's given me a lot, and he's been very supportive and understanding and given me all the tools that I need to succeed. In terms of, I think he trusted me enough with the HMO because it was a huge gamble, and I wouldn't have put the money in without his sign off or his approval. His name had to be on the application as well, because nobody was going to give me that money.
Yeah, sure.
But he trusted me to be able to make it work, and I didn't want to let him down. So I made sure that I put my all in this, and the risks were minimal. But he actually asked me, when I told him I want to do an MBA at Oxford, he asked me a question, and I'm going to ask it to you. And I'm not going to give you a lot of time to think about it.
Shit. I didn't get into Oxford, so I'm probably going to fail this.
No, you don't even know what the question is.
Defeatist, self-defeatist attitude.
You're already like, oh, no, I'm going to fail. How do you know?
Shoot. Go for it.
Well, this is what they asked him in the interview. And he told me if I gave the right answer, he'll let me do an MBA, and I didn't give the right answer, so I didn't do an MBA.
Shit.
But
I'll probably give the same answer that you gave. Go on.
He goes, you've been in charge of a failing company. Who is the first person you fire and the last person you fire? Go.
What an absolutely brilliant question. Jesus Christ. Okay, so without thinking about it too much, who's the first person I hire? So the first person I fire is a CEO.
Okay. Why?
Because the buck stops with him.
All right.
And the last person is probably the finance guy to make sure that the business is wrapped up correctly.
Why? Because you're a finance guy. So you're like, don't fire those guys.
Because the last person to go, you need to make sure that everything's winding down correctly. Like, there's no point in having a sales or a marketing or a somebody that isn't close to the numbers to make sure that the assets and liabilities are squared off correctly. So
I mean, with this, there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I think I
Oh,
said at
damn
the
it. I
beginning.
thought you were going to tell me I was
No,
going to get
but
in
I'll
Oxford
tell
now.
you what my dad said, and then what kind of makes
Yeah,
sense to
yeah,
me.
okay,
He
tell me.
said the first person you fire is the CFO.
Yeah, but I said the opposite. Shit.
He said the person in charge of the finance. Because how are you letting the company lose all that money? So he was like, that's the first person.
Okay.
He said he'll keep the CEO around because you can learn from him for a seamless handover. And the last person you fire is HR to keep up employee morale during the changes.
Right, I see. Now that does make sense. That's what I would do.
You're like, I was testing you.
Exactly. It's easy when you know. You know what? That is wonderful to hear stuff like that. That your dad is stimulating your mind in that way. Because I had fortunately similar in my life as well. And I'm not sure that everybody does have that.
Yeah.
And whether it's within your family or whether it's somebody that's external to you, I think it's such an important thing to have that kind of inspiration around you. And like I said, just not many people are fortunate enough to have it. So. And then there's two schools of thought as well, where it's like some people, I think, negatively look upon people that have come from having that support system, and they say, oh, they've had support, and of course they've done such great things, and of course, and it's like, well, I think the way I like to think about it is, well, yes, what I did was I took that level though, and I took it another notch up, or another 2 notches up, or went to the moon with it. And I've seen people do that, and I've seen at the same time people coming from wealthy families and stuff, and they've done zero basically.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, it's not the fault of the person that has had inspirational people around them that have been able to stimulate their mind and give them insight into things that makes them a great person. I think it's what they do with it from that point onwards that is most important. So it's really, really good and positive to hear that you've had that. And I hope that other families out there, other mums and dads and other people are out there to inspire the next young property investor of the year. So I think that's, hats off to your dad for doing that. What I wanted to ask you is about how you source deals. So we talked about investor.com, which is no longer around. Do you have a favorite way of finding these deals? Is it auctions? Is it estate agents? Is it property sources? Is it offline, sending letters through letterboxes? Do you have a favorite, or how do you go about it?
When I'm looking for deals, I am on Rightmove and Zoopla and all of that, even more than Instagram or social media. I'm just scouring those. With auction, I review, but I always tread carefully with auction because you need to. You very rarely would I go through a conveyancing process and not discover new information. So going through auction and not kind of giving my lawyers a good 2-3 months to dissect all this information makes me a little bit nervous sometimes. I kind of like when they take their time.
You got a little bit more time to think.
Surveyors, and then because I want to know exactly what I'm getting into, especially because as soon as you buy it, it becomes your responsibility in full. And people expect that you would have done the correct due diligence before you purchase the property. It's unforgiving. If you bought a property and there's a problem, you have to solve it. You don't get to say, oh, I didn't know about this, because it's like, well, it's yours, so you should have known, or you should have made an effort to find out. So I'm very careful about that. And yeah, I think right now I'm just using what I have. So my old house, my new house. So I'm not really actively looking for new deals, but I am always keeping an eye on the market. And I mean, I know a lot of deal sources in the industry, and they're great. So they're definitely on my radar if I don't find anything.
Are they great though? Well, some of them are.
I've never used them, to be honest. They say they're great.
I find there's actually the ones that are on what I like to call the property circuit, where you might see the tip of the iceberg of the industry, kind of on social media and stuff. The ones that are really good, like commercial land agents and that sort of thing, they're not in these circles, and you have to kind of know who they are. And then the ones that have bought a course here or there, I do find that the quality of the kind of stuff that they send you is usually substandard. But there are some really lovely people out there, and I'm hoping that some of those people will always graduate to doing really good things.
Actually, I had a look because I recommended a friend of mine to a developer. And then because I'd recommended them, I kept asking them to send me the documents just because I felt a little bit responsible. And I noticed something I couldn't say to my friend because they were already in the thick of it. But this developer or this individual had told them to purchase a house, and then they had to spend about $30K to renovate it. And then the end value was identical to what like 3 doors down a newly renovated house was. So I thought, what is the point of you going through the headache of buying something that's run down and then spending on it when you're just going to bring it literally without any kind of
No margin,
appreciation,
yeah.
no margin, where it's going to match. I couldn't say it to my friend because they were already buying it, but I thought it's the little things like that you got to be careful.
Is it got high enough yield? Because sometimes, like I've done that. I did one last year where I bought it, spent £200,000 doing it up, and I made about 30k on the balance sheet. So it's all in cost 450. It was worth 480. Got valued at 480. I think it's probably worth about 500, but never mind. It got valued at 480. Coincidentally, actually, it's a very interesting story. I've got a building in the northeast. I knew that this would happen. I got two lenders, so I paid double the amount. I spent £4,000 to £2,000 to get two lenders with two different values to go and value it. One of them came in at 395, the other one came in at 475. It's just crazy. But anyway, let's take 480 as the value of this property that I did last year, which I'll accept reluctantly. And maybe I should have got two values on that as well. Anyway, my point being is the yield is so good on it because I've gone from 4 beds to 8 beds, 8 bathrooms. And I knew the area and I knew how much income it's going to kick off and my return on the capital employed and a little bit on the balance sheet. I thought it might be, I felt for me, the return on capital employed from the money that I pull out and how much I leave in and the income that's producing and the long-term capital growth, it would be worthwhile. Is that similar to what you're talking about, or the yield's not even that good?
Well, they took it to exactly what the other house was. So they could have just bought that and rented it out and then been making income from day one. So that was my only, or they could have bought it, rented out two of the rooms downstairs, and then worked on an ensuite upstairs. At least they're still generating income, because when my friend with the renovation going on had no source of income during the renovation, so that was an additional cost that was leaving.
Yeah, not the deal of the century, not an award-winning deal.
No. But I think just being mindful when you're going into things like this.
So now that this 2025 is upon us. Are you looking for, because, you set the bar so high for yourself and you're like, damn, I need to find another house that I can, quadruple the value of. You mentioned that you've got the two projects going on here and there. Are you purposefully not putting that pressure on you to kind of like achieve that same great level again?
With my house in London, because remember I said on the road, there's no cap on how much it can be worth.
Right.
So I'm trying to be really strategic in how I allocate the funds to it. And I'm hopefully going to add like a lot to
what
the
area of London are we talking?
It's way west.
Yeah.
Way west.
So there's no cap. So this is kind of like where very, very
so
wealthy people. So you need like
this
Swarovski kind of like chandeliers and stuff.
No, I wish I could live in a house like that. It's just the kind of road. It's a nice road. So some people will, if you do the house nice enough, will be happy to spend that kind of money. So I'm hopefully, if I play my cards right and I do this and I kind of get the return on investment that I'm looking at, I want to go for an international award.
International. Well, you know what? To be fair.
But while I'm doing this,
one step at a time, absolutely. And you're already on the first rung, so that's the next step.
But while I'm training my builder, my contractor in Manchester on my projects, because I'm very proud of the work that I do. So if he's on my projects and he makes a mistake, it's fine because it's mine. But once I start taking clients on, and I think that I will maybe in a year from now, I want to make sure that his work is perfect. He's got tons of experience under his belt, even though it's just trial and error with me. And that's my next step, to be honest. So I'm just making sure that my team is reliable, is perfect at what they do. I'm learning as well because I'm still young, so that when I do take on clients, every single client that I get, I can guarantee high-level quality work, return of investments. But I can't go into it right now because I still feel like I'm learning.
Yeah, so no, of course. And I think no matter how long you've been doing it, every day is a school day. And as long as you have that kind of approach, I think you'll do fine. One thing, though, the estate agency within me, the estate agent within me, is saying that every road has a ceiling price. Every road.
Oh yeah, okay.
Even in
I know.
Mayfair,
I'm saying it's like nobody's paying like 20 million for this road.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So even within that, they may pay above the average price per square foot for the area, or they might break the ceiling price.
But there is still a cap.
There's still going to be a cap. So I just want to make sure you're not going to go and buy that Swarovski chandelier
no, don't worry.
and then expect somebody to think, because I have had people around me that were like, no, but because if you do this grand design thing or if you create this exceptional, people will pay over the odds, and yes, you will get a premium, but within the realms of kind of like there's a cap within that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what, even on that point, that's what I meant by being careful about where you allocate the funds. So if you invest in, for example, an extension or even a loft conversion, adding extra bathrooms, that adds value. If you invest in quartz flooring, you don't know that the person that buys it will like that, appreciate it, or even add it to the value of the house.
Exactly.
So if you want to do it for yourself, fine, but don't think that it's going to add value. So
Good lesson.
that's what I kind of meant by we're going to try to build it in a way where the structure and the architecture and the design, they just rejected my planning permission for it, by the way.
They rejected it.
Yeah.
Oh, happy
So
days.
I'm speaking really ambitious about something the council doesn't even want me to do.
What was the planning application for?
It's for a wraparound extension, but
Double story?
Double story in Hillingdon. They rejected it. I know they rejected it because they don't think it fits the culture and the heritage of the road. Yeah, but I think that this is disputed. So, do you want to hear the approach that I'm taking to this?
Go on. Are you going to appeal?
I don't know if this is the correct approach because nobody's ever done it before. But this is how I do things. So if we appeal, it's a 9 to 12 month waiting list.
Yeah.
If I resubmit, I run the risk of them rejecting again for culture and heritage, which, to be fair, you can say about anything. It's so wishy-washy.
Subjective, yeah.
So I've hired a solicitor to contact the council directly and explain my position. I would love to redesign and resubmit and save the council and myself time and money, but I don't want to. I need to understand exactly why they've rejected it. Either they come back and they say, we would be happy with XYZ. I use that correspondence to support my application and I get an approval, or they come back and they're still wishy-washy and they can't back up what they say. And then we say, right, we are going to submit something very close to what we've already submitted, giving you guys a second chance to rectify your decision without us going through an appeal. And then, again, using the correspondence to support the application to say, look, you guys may have rejected it the first time, but as you can see here, it wasn't unreasonable merits.
Because if you win an appeal, then they have to pay costs, your costs. Is that right?
Yeah, but also most of the time you don't get 100% of your costs. So yeah, and plus you still lose time, and time is money. The appeal doesn't work for anybody, to be honest. But I had a review through the planning policies, and one thing that people kept saying to me is the council doesn't like it, or the council doesn't appreciate things like this. But that's not how things work in the UK. We are a very regulatory, policy-driven country. I mean, you can accuse the UK of anything. You can't really accuse them of being corrupt. You can't bribe a planning officer. So
there's a few absolutely brilliant things. Yeah, the legal system here is one of the best systems in the world.
And you have to apply. You have to be coherent with the policies. And so that's great, because if these policies are there and everybody knows that it's not a corrupt system, then you have a responsibility to then implement these policies, right?
Which makes me think that you may be able to win an appeal, but again, I'm not an absolute expert in this, but it is a long, drawn-out process. And I know a number of people that, very, very experienced developers that have worked for PLCs and the like, and award-winning in their own right. And they strategically go through to appeal, knowing that. But yeah, absolutely,
it's such a long. This is why the only thing that's putting me off is I'm looking at that 9 to 12 months.
It can take years. It can take a lot. It can take 2-3 years in some cases because of.
I could have a whole kid. In that.
You can have a few kids in there.
I could have kids and send them to school before I built my extension.
Exactly. That's property development is a marathon, not a sprint, and that's just the nature of the beast.
That's true.
But a few quick fire questions. What's the best bit of advice you've ever had?
Look at somebody who's doing what you want to do and keep them close and try to learn from them.
Very good, very good. And what's the worst piece of advice you've ever had?
You can't do it. Because it's like, no, you can't do it. I can't do it.
Fair play. That is a good response to that when somebody tells you that.
But I've had a lot of people say to me, like, are you sure you can do this? You can't really. Even with this whole appeal, like the whole planning that I'm doing right now, it's a leap of faith, and a lot of people in the industry are saying, we don't think it's going to succeed. And there's one of the reasons why I don't share a lot of my developments online is because there's a little voice behind, in the back of my head, a little insecurity that goes, what if they're right? Like, what if I've kind of missed the ball here and I'm going to do this thing and it's not going to work out? But I think just believe in yourself. And what's the worst that could happen if it doesn't work out?
So you're a successful person in property. having won these awards, and these are coveted awards, the Property Investor Awards, what traits do you believe are necessary to have to be successful in property?
I think being successful in property, the same traits you'd need to be successful in any other industry. Last year, I made finalists for the youngest investor, but I lost. And I think I met you last year. I was such a small fish in a big pond, and nobody knew who I was. And I went around the room and I met all of these new, interesting people. And I asked them where I'd gone wrong because they had more experience than me. They told me to analyze the deals of the people that had won and find out my points of weakness. And I think that's one trait that if you want to be successful in anything, you need to have. Go to the people that are experienced in your field. And sometimes it's difficult for us to identify what we need to work on. But if you go to somebody with experience, they might be able to nudge you in the right direction.
Yes.
And then look at the people that have achieved what you're trying to achieve and work towards that. And then just keep honing in on your tasks, keep speaking to people that are doing better than you, and keep working hard, persevering.
Very good. I completely agree with all that. Surround yourself with good people, and being able to do a self-audit on your strengths and weaknesses, be honest about those, and probably double down on what you're really good at and find other people to help you with the stuff that you're not very good at.
Yes.
And I think that's very good advice. And if people wanted to find you and reach out to you and pick your brains and connect with you, I know you're somewhat of a socialite in the property circles. And so how can people catch up with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn at Mariam Radi, and I'm on Instagram at It's Mariam Radi. My Instagram is going to be pivoting into a different direction now and focusing more on property. So I'm going to be sharing more of my journey on it because right now it's just my outfits.
Fair enough. Well,
Which I love, but I feel like people might be more interested in the property stuff.
well, you know what? You'll probably find there's a Venn diagram of the two people that enjoy a bit of both, that you'll attract
For all
that
the
kind
girls
of person. And we need, actually one of the things about property people is that at some point, I've mentioned it before, it was close to being renamed property men because it was like it's such a male-driven environment and industry in general, like engineering and a few other industries. But it's good to see not only females but young people also doing inspirational stuff, supporting the next generation of property investors and developers, because we do have an affordable housing crisis. Real estate is a human need, and we need more people that are passionate about what we do. And so I'm here to support you, and thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.